So let me turn on my camera and give you a proper introduction. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is John Meredith. I will be your instructor for this class session. We're going to talk about Cloud SIEM fundamentals, SIEM standing for Security, Information, and Event Management. So it is our product that allows you to manage your security instances. I think you'll like it. I also want to mention to you that tomorrow we'll be doing the Cloud SIEM administration class. So here we're going to look at things from an analyst perspective. Tomorrow we'll look at things from an administrative perspective. So I'm talking to you from my home here in Bedford, New Hampshire. I've asked you all where you're located. It's only fair that I do the same. So I live up in the New England area, and looks like it's going to be a nice day out here. Right now it's 59 degrees. It's going to go to whopping 72 degrees here later today. So the only ask that I have of you is if you've got a question, please feel free to ask. Okay. Been teaching since about 1982 when I started as a Navy instructor, and wound up here at Sumo Logic about 2.5 years ago. So really enjoy teaching. So done other things. I've been an IT manager, a DBA, a programmer, a network admin, all that fun stuff. Numerous. It was. We're talking about certifications earlier. I have an armload of Microsoft certifications, Novell certifications, Cisco certifications, all kinds of certifications, obviously all the Sumo Logic certifications as well. So, but anyway, that's enough about me. I am joined here by my colleague, Odell. Odell, you want to say hi, sir?
Absolutely. And good morning and welcome back to some of you. Glad to have you again. John, as he mentioned, has a plethora of information. I will be manning the chat, so if you want to put in questions there, that's awesome. I see John is from Illinois as well. I'm from Illinois as well. You're from Chicago, so not you, John Meredith, but the John that's in the class participating. Hannes, I think is your name. Welcome, all of you.
Okay, so there we go. I'm going to stop the video sharing here, the camera, just to save some bandwidth, and let's get this party started. So our game plan, we are going to talk about how data gets ingested into our Cloud SIEM product, the process that it goes through, and there's lots of test questions on that process. So as I go through the material here, I will try to prepare you for the exam, okay? I'll also show you where you can get copies of our slides, where you can get copies of a recording of this class, where you can get copies of our lab guides, although I'll put that up in the chat in just a little bit. Again, all of our exams are open note, open book. And of course, we're here to answer questions if you get stuck. We're going to do a series of labs where we're going to talk about the Cloud SIEM environment. We're going to discuss the user interface, explore that user interface. Then we're going to talk about threat investigation using Cloud SIEM. So we're going to talk about what an insight is and how that insight gets generated by signals and all that good stuff. And so we'll do a couple of labs on investigating those insights. So we'll investigate them initially, look at some of the fundamentals things, then we'll do some sort of advanced lab investigations and take advantage of the power of Sumo Logic as a whole and play with it there. Then finally, we're going to talk about customizing and how tuning the Cloud SIEM. And we're going to talk about things like rule tunings, what rule tuning is, creating your own custom rules, creating your own custom insights. And again, in the admin class tomorrow, we'll talk more about customizing the status fields and a bunch of other things as well. And tomorrow we'll actually set up collectors and get data coming in here. So that's basically the class. And then, of course, the last hour we're going to give you to take the certification exam. So again, certification exams are free, my favorite price. And so is these classes as well. So glad to have you. All right. So the only request is if you got any questions, feel free to ask. Not only are we going to try to encourage you to take the exam, but we'll even make it worth your while. So if you take our certification exams, you can fill out this form, this link right here, and we'll put this link in the chat box when we get around to taking the exams. But you can put in there, all the exams that you've taken or whatever, for example, I know somebody here was just taking a bunch of exams today and yesterday. And if you want to put your certification exams in there, we'll verify them. But basically, we're going to send you an Uber Eats voucher for $15 for each exam that you pass. Now, the point is, that we can only send you 2 vouchers per day due to tax laws, but we will send you those vouchers. So we'll send you some today, tomorrow, next week, whatever, and until we get you all caught up. But when you take these exams, if you took yesterday's exam and you forgot to fill out the form, you can add that to today's form as well. After you take today's exam, submit them both, one form, and get $30 worth of Uber Eats vouchers. So who says there's no such thing as a free lunch? All right, on to the class. Let's talk about how data gets ingested into the Cloud SIEM environment, okay? Again, what is Cloud SIEM? It is our enterprise-grade platform that lets you see what's going on with regards to security issues and operational issues, okay? And again, SIEM stands for Security Information and Event Management. I'm not fond of abbreviations, so every time I see an abbreviation, I want to at least spell it out at least once or twice. When the data comes in, the data goes through our normal collection process. If you're familiar with Sumo Logic, you know we've got collectors, you know we've got sources. We take that information in here, we ingest it through our normal collection and ingestion process that is part of Sumo Logic. That collection and ingestion process is set up both in the continuous intelligence platform as well as our CSE or Cloud SIEM enterprise platform. And like I said, we'll talk about that tomorrow in the admin class. But that's going to generate for us messages. Now, from those messages, we are then going to parse the fields out of the messages. We know what these messages look like, right? Whether they're coming from CloudTrail, or they're coming from firewalls, or they're coming from whatever. We know how to parse them out. We're going to find maybe a field that says, you know, I've got the 127.6.5.4, and it will say, actually, that's an IP address. Let's take that, let's parse that out, let's convert it to an IP address, 127.6.8.4, or whatever the number as I used. And then we're also going to map it to the specific fields that we have, right? So we've got specific fields, that's source IP. We'll map that out. We're going to find and identify maybe the user name. We'll pull that out and map it to a field. We're also going to enrich this. You may recall from our yesterday's presentation that we have a relationship with CrowdStrike. So we're going to take those IPs and those domain names and stuff like that, and we're going to look at them, send them to CrowdStrike, and see if we know if there's any malicious nature to those fields. And that's what's going to generate our records. So our system automatically generates the records, and this parsing, mapping, and enrichment is done in the Cloud SIEM enterprise environment. So we now have these records. We're going to compare these records with a whole bunch of MITRE ATT&CK framework rules. So we at Sumo Logic maintain those rules. If they need to be updated, we update them. We update and send you updates to the rules about every 2 weeks, unless there's an emergent situation that comes out. Then we'll send it out pretty darn immediately. Point is that we generate those rules. You can also create your own rules. Now, we manage our rules, you manage your rules as far as updates and things like that. So, but our rules, like I said, we generally send an update at least every 2 weeks, and I'll show you how you can see where that is. Now, if these records match the rules, so if we've got a record that says, you know, we got a phishing email, and that rule, we come have a rule for phishing emails, and the rule matches the record, we are then going to extract out the entity. And the entity consists of either the username or the host name or the computer name or the IP address, some sort of who that is. And that's going to generate a signal. Now, additionally, each of these rules have a certain point value. So what's going to happen is that we're going to keep track of that signal and that point value. And this is where most SIEM products stop. But we're going to take it a step farther. And we're going to look over a 2-week period by that entity and see all the activity that entity is doing. And if the score of the signals is 12 or greater, then we will generate an insight. So we're going to correlate the signals that an entity generates. And like I said, if the scores of the individual signals are greater than or equal to 12, we're going to generate an insight, and you'll see that in our heads-up display. And then that's obviously something you want to focus on. One of the concerns that most SOC teams have is that there's such a thing as SOC fatigue, right? Analyst fatigue. There's a lot of data to go through, a lot of raw logs. We don't want you to have to go through the raw logs. We want to make it easy for you to find where the threats and vulnerabilities and issues are so that you can focus on solving those things. That's our goal. Again, we take our fictitious company here, Sumo Logic Coffee, which serves a great cup of coffee. And again, the data comes in through our normal collection and ingestion process, generates our messages. Then those messages we're going to parse out, and just to show you here a little animated tool here, a little slide, going to parse out. We see something that looks like this. We're going to convert that to an IP address. And then we're going to map it to our metadata tag, source device IP or whatever. And then we're going to enrich it. We're going to go out and send that information out to CrowdStrike and see if CrowdStrike knows anything about this. And so we'll get that information. Then, as I said, they'll give us our records. We're going to take our records. We're going to compare them against our MITRE ATT&CK framework rules that we have, several hundred rules in our arsenal. And we're going to sit there and see if any of those rules match our records. If they do, then we're going to generate a signal. Signals are bad. Signals mean that there's something going on. So if a rule triggers, the entity is extracted and a signal is created. Again, these entities are tracked by their activity score. The activity score is associated from the rule. And we'll see that just a little bit. Right now, it's a little wordy and it's a little, maybe not very clear. The minute I show you the interface, it'll clear it right up. As I said, once we generate a signal, we're going to correlate those signals based on the entity over a 2-week period of time. And if the score is 12 or greater, then we'll generate an insight. So here, if you look at our heads up display, and this is simply a slide of it, in a little bit, we'll log in, we'll take a look and see what's going on. But in this heads up display in the outer ring here, this blue area, these are my records. So there are my records, and from my records, I generate my signals. That's what these blue columns are. I can see all my various signals. And then from my signals, if I correlate them, I generate these red insights. So these red insights are really the area that we want to probably focus on. We can look at records, we can look at signals, we can look at various things, but chances are the insights is what we really want to focus on. And then my range here of this circle, as far as how much time I'm going through, there's a setting for that, and I'll show you where that setting is when we get into the interface. For those of you who are gamers, if this interface looks familiar, it was when we built this interface, we consulted with the user interface folks of World of Warcraft, and they provided us the insight into this user interface. So there we go. What do you say we log in here to our Sumo Logic environment? So what I'd like you to do is, of course, fire up Google Chrome or Firefox, and I'd like you to go to service.sumologic.com. That's service.sumologic.com. Then I'd like you to pick a 3-digit number. For those of you in class yesterday, you probably want to use the same number. Fine with me, but I want a 3-digit number. And then you're going to log in as an email address of training plus analyst with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. And then the password is security 22 exclamation mark. So let's see how this works. Let me go out here. Let me go to, assuming I can type today, service.sumologic.com. Okay. And just for fun here, I'm going to go ahead and grab 603. Why 603? Because that's the area code of New Hampshire, okay, where I live. So I'm going to log in as training plus analyst 603. One thing I would also ask of you, whatever number that you want to take, go ahead and type it in the chat box. So that way we know what number you're going to take. And then at sumologic.com. And then, as I said before, the password is, and I'll show it to you here, security 22 exclamation mark. Now, as Odell mentioned yesterday, and we've mentioned before, this password is good for the month of June. On the first Monday of July, we will change that password again. I don't know what that password is going to be. I'm going to go ahead and see, I've got a bunch of tabs here when I logged in. I could close them up individually. Or if I grab these 3 vertical dots on any one of the tabs, I can choose to close all tabs. So I can clean that up a little bit. Okay. So we want to make sure you log in. And one of the things I'd like to do here, when you log in and you're able to get in here and you're able to access this without any problems, I'd like you to raise your hand. So in the participants area, if you would raise your hand, I would appreciate it. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I am going to add here a document that I am going to put in the chat box. So this is our lab guide. In fact, this lab guide looks strangely enough like this. It's a PDF document that I have put in the chat box. Now, some of you, your companies may have denied you the ability to download a document in the Zoom area. And if they did, that's okay. If you would, send Odell your email address and we will email it to you. So in chat, let Odell know what your email address is, and we will gladly email this to you, okay? Pure and simple. But if you can, go ahead and download this lab guide, because this lab guide is the lab guide that you and I are going to use for the exercises that we're going to do today, okay? You may recall, those of you in class yesterday, we went to our help site and we found our labs there. These are new classes. We've decided to do things a little differently with our labs. All right. Excellent. Now, while I'm here, while I'm in the Sumo Logic area, and actually, I'll go with a 603 account first right now. While I'm in the Sumo Logic area, and let's make sure everybody gets logged in. If you're having problems logging in, please let us know. Let me or Odell know, and we will gladly try to help you out. I realize not everybody was going to want to log in. I get it. You know, you're busy with other things or whatever, but this is the hands-on portion of the lab. We really do want you to log in. We do really want you to participate here, because that's where the learning really takes place. I've lowered all the hands, just so you know. So if you're having problems logging in, now is the time to talk to us. Okay. Brett asked, is the link to download in the chat? No, the document is in the chat. So I will upload it again just for fun here. There it is. I'm uploading it right now. You should be able to see it in the chat box. You should be able to download that. Okay. And that is this document right here. So that's our lab guide. Okay. All right. Now, one thing I wanted to mention to you, and that is, I mentioned this certification exam upcoming is open book, open notes, right? Open instructor. You can even ask us instructors. So while we're waiting for that, those of you need a copy of that lab guide. If you click on this home tab right here, and if you click on certification, and if you click on get certified, even with the training analyst account that you're using, okay, you'll see these three areas. Now, you may recall, those of you in class yesterday, you saw a lot more areas here. That's because we turned off some of the things with from these training analyst account. We don't want the training analyst account to be used to get certified. We want to make sure you use your account to get certified so that you get credit. Training analyst 603 has passed this numerous times, but that's not John Meredith. So I want to make sure you log in with your account to get credit for it. That's why that block is not here. Also, our self-paced training is not here, because again, we want you to log in with your credentials, your account. And I'll talk about that when we get ready for the certification exam. What we will do is we will log out of our training environment here. You will log into your company's Sumo Logic environment with your accounts, and then you'll be able to see those things, the certifications, the self-paced training, et cetera, et cetera. But I do want to point out to you, whether you're using the training account or your account, we have this recorded live training. And if you click on this recorded live training, you will see recordings of all of our certification classes that we do. We even have some materials from the RSA conference that was just 2 weeks ago out in San Francisco. But here is where the Cloud SIEM Fundamental Cert Jam class is. And if you click on that, and if we click on the registration button, which doesn't cost you anything, right? There's no cost here. Here, there we go. You can see and listen to Josh do this same class. Here you can download our slides, and here you can also download our lab guide. So if you want to, this is another place to get the lab guide. I will put this in there. Okay. So Brett, for example, if you can't download it from the Zoom, maybe you can go out here and I just put that link into the chat box so you can pull that stuff down this way. Any questions about this? This, by the way, is our learning management system, our LMS. All right. So that is that resource. Thank you very much, Odell, for taking care of that. So now let's get into our Cloud SIEM environment. So here in our Sumo Logic training environment, you'll see here in our main menu, we have this Cloud SIEM Enterprise. We also have something called Cloud SOAR, which is an environment that we're standing up right now. We're building the courseware for it, but basically we have a security orchestration and automation response tool. So stay tuned for that. We'll be having training in that at our Illuminate conference in September. And from there on out, we'll be offering certification classes and training classes in that right now. But we want the Cloud SIEM Enterprise. And if you click on the Cloud SIEM Enterprise, Shazam, you get this cool interface. So we have this lovely interface here that we're going to walk through. So that's what I want you to do is click on this. If you are in the Cloud SIEM Enterprise environment and you want to go back to the continuous intelligence platform, up here in the upper right-hand corner, not quite far right corner, but upper right-hand corner, you'll see a grid. If you click on that grid, you can click on continuous intelligence platform, and it will take you back here to the Sumo Logic interface. Okay. Now, if you all don't mind, I am going to close my tabs here for a second. And I'm going to go out here again, only this time I'm going to log in with my account. And there's a reason why I'm doing it, okay? I'm going to log in with my account. Oops, excuse me. Let me sign out. Let me log in with my account. The reason is I have a lot more permissions. And so I can show you things that you won't necessarily see with your account, okay? So let me make sure that we're good in the chat. Thank you very much. All right. Excellent, guys. Sound like everybody's, I assume everybody's in. And then once again, once you're in the Cloud SIEM Enterprise, I'm sorry, excuse me, once you're in the continuous intelligence platform, again, if you need to open up this navigation panel, you can click on it. And then you can click on Cloud SOAR Enterprise. And that will then take us to our CSE environment that we're going to be playing with today. Cloud SIEM Enterprise, CSE. Okay. So I assume we're all here. If not, I want to make sure you get all here. Let me give it a minute here for this to happen. All right. This little button up here where it says Sumo, that Sumo icon, that is always take you back to this page. So if I go someplace else, like if I go into Insights or if I go into Signals, and I'll talk about those in a minute, I can click on this icon and it will take me back here. Now, this system tells me it's online and its time range is 24 hours. So earlier I'd mentioned that there's a selector that you can use. Here's that selector to determine the range of this and the range of the information that you're seeing. So 24 hours works for me. Now, in that 24 hours, we have ingested 47,000 records. That's up 210% from the previous 24 hours. We've generated 11,000 signals. That's up 106% from the last 24 hours. And then we've generated 6 insights, which is up 50%. Now, as I said, this is a security information and event management system. So the question is, how are we doing on these alerts and these signals and all that fun stuff? So I can see how many are new, how many have been resolved, and how long it's been taking for things to get done. So a little bit of overview there of performance. Then here I can look at my insights by status. I have 5 new insights. I have nothing in progress, nothing in custom. I've got 1 that I've closed. And you can see across down here a timeline This is your timeline and your x-axis, and I can see things that I've closed or insights that have been created during this timeline. So gives you a little idea of what's going on there. By the way, this status here, you can customize the status, and we'll talk about that in tomorrow's class. Again, here's that all seeing eye or heads up display where I can see, again, my insights, my signals, my records, all that good stuff. Over here on the far right side, I have my latest insight. So here in my latest insight, I see it's got a number associated with it. All of our insights are numbered so we can keep track of them. And then the command and control came from our MITRE ATT&CK framework. So the names of our insights are based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Test question. Don't get it wrong, please. And then I can see who the entity was. In this case, the entity was a user named Rico Dynamite. Yes, we have a little fun with this. We take some liberties with creating some interesting usernames. And then I can see this insight was generated by 3 signals. Its overall severity score is high. There's low, medium, high, and critical. It happened over a period of 5 days. So starting on the 17th, going to the 22nd. And then if I look closely here, I'll see there's little icons here, little signals to indicate what the 3 individual signals were. And I could click on review and go into this insight. Or I can click on these insights and go into these insights that way, okay? But I'll show you that in just a few minutes. Down here at the bottom, this is kind of my syslog. So when a user or an analyst or whatever resolves something, changes the status of something, whatever, I'll see that here in my little syslog. So I've got that information as well. I can find things up here by insights, signals, whatever. I can click on this to see all of my insights. I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. I can click on this to see all of my signals, the various signals that have appeared. I can look at this by entity. So maybe I want to look based on who my entities are and see who my highest running entity is. It's Napoleon Dynamite, okay? And so I can see, again, an entity could be a username, could be a host name, could be a computer name, IP address, could be a lot of different things. Over here, I can actually look at the raw records. You may recall we got thousands of records in about every hour. So if you want to look at records, we will do that by specifying some criteria. If we don't show all the records, it'd be overwhelming, probably scare some people. Tomorrow, when we set up our collectors and ingest data, we will show you how to look more at records because we want to make sure the records are coming in and being processed correctly. Now here, I have something called content. And when I click on content, I see lots of things. I see rules, rule tuning, threat intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. I've got full administrative rights on this environment. You do not. You will only see rules, rule tuning, and custom insights. So the point is that you can, I can, we can, when we set this up, we can decide what users have, what privileges, and what things that they can access. So again, that's all managed, and we'll show you how to manage that tomorrow in the admin class. I have this gear icon. You do not, but in this gear icon, I can see things like log mappings. Here's where I can customize my statuses. Here's where I can customize my actions, my context actions, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. So again, I've got full administrative rights. Tomorrow, when you log in as administrators, you will see some of these, not all of these, but you'll see some of these. This little bell up here is this announcement. If I click on it, you see it's got that red gleam on there. Every time we do an update to this, we will generate a red gleam. And you can see what we've changed. You can go in here and see what we've updated about the application, what things are new, what rules we've changed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then over here, where the question mark is, this is where our documentation is. Now, there is a test question. It is out of date. The test question said, and I think it's in the admin class, not in this one, but I'll tell it to you anyway. The red gleam here denotes that there's some new notifications, there's some new updates, there's new things. But that red gleam used to be on this right here. We've separated the two things out, separated announcements out from our normal documentation help, all that fun stuff. So But you'll see that when you see the red gleam, the test question is when you see the red gleam, it means that there are new announcements, new things that we've done some updates and you can see what's going on. As I mentioned before, if I click on this grid, it will take me back to my CIP, my continuous intelligence platform, the Sumo Logic you played with yesterday. And then over here, this little face icon, if you will, that shows me who I'm logged in as and that sort of thing. So that is pretty much the interface. Are there any questions? By the way, in our student lab guide, if I were to go into my lab guide here, log lab 0, you logged in, right? There you go. Lab 1, exploring the Cloud SIEM user interface. That's what I just went through. So we have done lab 0 and lab 1. We've logged in here and poked around, had ourselves a good time. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to my slides for just a second. Now what we want to do is we want to focus on an insight and we want to investigate an insight. So that's what we're going to be doing here real quick. Getting started with threat investigation. Okay. We have 3 different use cases for 3 different companies. We have financial logic, which has big investors, particularly over in Europe, that deals with GDPR. Those of you not familiar with GDPR, it's a security standard, a privacy standard that happens, it's in Europe, where people can opt out of having their private information being used by a company. So they're very big about privacy in Europe, and so that's what GDPR is. And so our financial logic use case has to do with GDPR. We have a Sumo Pharma, right? And they're worried about HIPAA, Health Insurance Privacy Act or whatever, Privacy Access in the Act or whatever, and data privacy. So Sumo Pharma is worried about that. And then of course, Sumo Coffee, where you and I can buy coffee using good old PCI, and where we want to encrypt the credit card information and make sure it's secure and all that fun stuff. So those are our 3 use cases. Now, why do I mention this? Well, if I go to our lab guide and I look at lab 2, investigating an insight, you'll see there's a lab 2A, there's a lab 2B for Sumo Pharma, and there's a lab 2C for Sumo Coffee. The point is, when we do this, I'm going to walk you through lab 2A. I'm going to walk you through that. We're going to do that one together. And then I'm going to ask you to do lab 2C on your own and draw your conclusions, and we will discuss it. Okay. By the way, lab 3 is also broken out the same way. So when we get around to lab 3, you'll see there's a lab 3A, a lab 3B, a lab 3C, so forth and so on. Okay. So that's why 3 different use cases, and you can have yourself a good time. I would mention to you that lab B's, 2B and 3B, we've changed the insight name on that. So trying to use those insights is going to be a little difficult. All right. So let me get back to my environment here. And let's talk about how a SOC analyst decides to play, right? So what happens is that the Sumo Logic Cloud SIEM environment is going to detect and monitor, right, what's going on. And they're going to sit and say, okay, we've notified you of this change. And so we're going to provide some baseline metrics, right? You can provide this in a dashboard. We can provide this in various alerts and things like that. So you and I, as the SOC analyst, are going to investigate this. We're going to look at the signals that make up this insight. And we're going to develop hypotheses and test it. We're going to, ultimately figure out what's going on here, what the story of the signals are trying to tell us. And then, of course, we're going to take action, right? Maybe we've got somebody who's clicking around with a phishing link, a phishing email. Well, we obviously want to scan their machine for viruses, clean up that phishing email, maybe, notify folks of, maybe remind the company about phishing emails and how to deal with them, what actions we take. And this is a cloud SIEM environment where, again, we can look at the security information and event management. So all the events that we take advantage of here, all the actions that we take, we can document this. So we're going to take actions and respond, and then we can go on to the next issue. So a day in the life of a SOC analyst looks something like this, right? They get some sort of an insight that they're supposed to investigate. Maybe it's assigned to them. Maybe they come on, they look at the console, say the latest one, whatever. They then investigate the signals that make this up, the raw logs if they need to, and they figure out what the story is this signal is trying to tell us. Excuse me, this insight is trying to tell us based on its signals. Then they hypothesize, again, what they think is going on. Record their findings, put it in the comments. I'll show what the comments are in a minute. Then they take action. Now, maybe it's the SOC analyst job to go out to the computer to help the user. Maybe it's not. Maybe they work with the network operations center. Maybe they work with, put in a JIRA ticket. The IT department does. Whatever they do, you can customize these actions. And we'll talk about that in tomorrow's class as well. But you can customize these actions and then have your teams take action. And then, of course, you would mark the status of this, maybe, set its status from new to either in progress or closed, depending on what actions you take. And then, of course, you can go on to the next new activity here, right? And so this is the day in the life of a SOC analyst. I will tell you there's going to be a test question or two about after you hypothesize, what do you do next? I think it's take action, right? So you specify the action. So I think there's a test question in that regard. As I mentioned before, all of our rules are based off the MITRE ATT&CK framework. If you did a search for MITRE ATT&CK spelled this way with an ampersand, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of information out there. There's initial access issues, 9 techniques, execution, 12 techniques, persistence, 19 techniques. But this is the system that we use as far as documenting, creating our rules, organizing things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll show you where that is in just a little bit. Talked about these use cases. So let me stop my slides here for a second. And let's talk about going into an insight. So I'm going to go ahead in my Cloud SIEM environment. I'm going to click on Insights. Now, when I look at this insights, there's 2 ways I can see it. One, I can see my laundry list of insights. Right? Here's my laundry list of insights. Great. Or over here on the right, if I click on this icon, I can see my insights by status. And again, the status can be customized. So I can see my insights by status, or I can see just a laundry list of my insights. Okay. If you're looking for a specific insight, we can go in here and filter for that specific insight. In fact, if I look at my instructions here for Lab 2A, they want me to click on the insights, and they want me to find an insight named persistence with initial access. So how do we do that? Where it says find insights, I'm going to go ahead and click up here. Excuse me. I'm going to go to my insights. There we go. And in my insights, I'm going to click up here, and hopefully I get a there. Let's see, it's not what I want. Hang on, folks. Click back to home. Click back to my insights. There we go. Here's what I want, my filters right there. So under my filters, I'm going to click on name, and I'm going to say my name contains, and I'm going to start typing in persistence. And as I start typing it in, it finds any insights that match what I'm typing. So here is my persistence with initial actions, the top one. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And now it's going to filter all of my insights to only show me this particular persistence with initial access. And as you can see, this one's in progress. Somebody's investigating this. This one's new, hasn't been dealt with yet. These are, by the way, these are basically repeating insights. Every day we generate this insight. Okay. So this is something we generate on the back end. So here's where I can see my insights. So what I want to do is I'd like you to follow along with me. And I want to grab insight 15146. It's the second one that should be listed here. It's dated 6/19, June 19th. Persistence with initial access. Okay. I want you to click on this insight. And when you click on this insight, it's going to take you to that specific insight. So here's the interface for an insight. When I'm in an insight, here's where I can take my actions. Again, another test question. In order to be able to access the actions button, where do you have to be? You have to be inside of an insight. Again, these actions can be customized. Additionally, I can specify a status here. Right now it's new. I can change it to, whatever status I want. And again, that can be customized. I can also assign this to somebody if I want to. I can assign it to myself if I want to. Here's the entity. So these signals that make up this insight all share this entity. And if I put my cursor next to the entity of the IP address, you'll see you've got this funny little box with 6 little squares in it. That's the context action button. And if you click on the context action button, I can do a whois lookup on that IP address. I can do a reverse DNS lookup on that IP address. I can do all kinds of things to see where that IP address has been. I can even look in Sumo Logic in our search query to see where that IP address has been in our system. So lots of power here as far as context and capabilities. I see the overall score here of the insight. Again, those run low, medium, high, and critical. And I can see information, a little information about this. I can see it generates 4 unique signals. It's last seen 2 days ago. Here's the start. And here's these tags come from the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Again, I believe that's another test question. And then down here is where I can add comments. So when I investigate this and resolve it and all stuff, I'm going to comment the heck out of this. So that's the left side of this. Now, on the right side of this, what I see here is a timeline. And I see this purple icon. I'm not sure if you see it really well. I can magnify my screen up a little bit, maybe make it a little easier for you. But I've got this purple icon here. This purple icon is my first signal. Device IP match threat intel file hash, or it's listed down here. So this particular signal has a score of 3. There is 1 record. Basically, what it's trying to tell me is it tried to, on the domain controller here on this IP address, it found a known malicious file. An antivirus scan resulted in a file. Now, this is nice. This tells me some good information, but I want to know more. You can, I can, we can click into this signal to see what makes this signal up. So again, a record flagged a file hash from a threat, a known threat. Okay. Here, when it happened, again, the score, the IP address that it happened from, and then I can start looking, where's the name of the file? By the way, most people disguise the name of the file, which is great because we use file hashes anyway. So I don't care what they name it. We're going to look for the file hash, and that's what we're going to detect on. So we can see all the fields that it captured, who the user was that put this file out there, all this wonderful metadata stuff. And it found it through CrowdStrike Falcon. Okay. So here's where the file is, command line, all that good stuff. So we found a malicious file. Okay. That's the first signal that happened. Again, it's got a value of 3. Now to see the next signal, I could either go back to signals and see and I could scroll to the next signal if I wanted to, or if I'm in a signal, like that first signal, I can click on this little icon and it will then take me to the second signal. This signal has a score of 4. The previous one had 3. 3 plus 4 is 7. Again, I want to make sure it gets over 12. That's what's going to generate my insight. Here, I've got a user received an email with a phishing link. That's never happened in any company, has it? No, we never get phishing links, right? Right, got it. So we can see that the user went in here and they clicked on the phishing link, all right? So this is what set us off. And again, I can see information about the threat and the URL and all that fun stuff and, get a good sense of that. Again, I can then click on this icon over here and it's going to take me to the next signal. Okay. Yeah, Edmund's right. Those phishing links are the ones we're supposed to click on immediately, right? You just want a free trip to wherever. Yeah, I got you. Okay. So this one tells me that Checkpoint has threat emulation found a malicious file. Okay. So I've got a couple of different systems telling me about this malicious file, which is great. Again, I'm correlating all my different logs, all my different sources in. Again, the same IP address. Again, I can see all the cool metadata here. It's a Trojan type file and all kinds of nifty stuff here. It's on port 443. All kinds of powerful stuff here. And then, and by the way, this has a score of 3. So we had 3 plus 4 plus 3, which last time I checked was a value of 10. I add them up. And then if I go to the last signal is a score of 5. So CrowdStrike has a detection summary event. It too found this file. That's what it's going to tell me here as I scroll down. It found this malicious file. So again, 10 plus 5 is 15. 15 is greater than 12. And that's what generated my insight. So my insights are when the combined scores of my signals are greater than 12 or equal, that are, basically combining the entity here, all the signals combined by an entity over a 2-week period. The sum of the scores is greater than or equal to 12. That's what generates my insight. Okay. So what has happened? What is this thing trying to tell me? Well, it's telling me I got a malicious file that generated a phishing link, that somebody then clicked on that phishing link and propagated the file some more, right? So what am I going to do? What would you do with your company? Okay. Preet asked how to look at the raw log for this signal. Great question, Preet. Hold that question. I'll come back to it in just a little bit. But what we could do, to answer your question, hang on a second here. I could take this context, I could click on it, and I could have it take me back to my raw logs. But let me do this. Let me go into, by the entity here, click on this context. Again, there's an option here to go into Sumo Logic log search. And the only thing you have to be careful here when you do that to see the raw logs is by default, remember we use a 15-minute window here. You want to expand that out. Probably want to expand it out about 7 days or so, maybe longer. And then here's where you can see where the individual logs are that generated this stuff. So here's the logs here that generated this various information. Or if you remember from yesterday when Odell was talking about the field browser here, you can go into the field browser and hang on a second. Let's see if I can find some better sources here. Funny, it only selects one source. So, okay, sorry, more than one source. So here I can see all the different sources that this information came from. 7 entries are from CrowdStrike. And I can, by the way, click on one of these if I want to, and then it will filter and show me only those logs from CrowdStrike. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can get into the logs and see the raw log data and all that good stuff. Now, I will tell you that you've stolen some of the thunder here for the next lab, but that's all right. Okay. So good question. Wanted to make sure you got the benefit of the question and the answer. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, we've seen this issue of a user receives a phishing link. What would you do? What would you do within your company? Previously in a past life, I would take this system offline, right? Unplug it. I would scour it, clean it, all that fun stuff. I would remind my users about email, phishing links and stuff like that. Maybe make them aware that we had a phishing link. And so, and clean the machine up and put it back in service. So that's a sort of thing that you may wind up doing, okay? Okay. Steve asked a really good question. Where does SOAR come in? Okay, good question, Steve. So SOAR stands for Security Orchestration and Automation Response. We have not completed the integration yet between SIEM and SOAR in our training environment. It's in our products, but it's not in our training environment yet. But the point is that I will be able to then automate this action. So rather than when these things happen, I can have it automatically invoke a playbook, which is part of the SOAR product. And that's going to automatically clean out the email and automatically take it offline and automatically do that sort of thing. So SOAR is kind of taking this a step farther and automating the response. And that's a whole nother conversation. That's not a quick little 2-minute answer. But Steve, hopefully that answers your question. And the fact that SOAR, we will have integration to this, where in here, we will be able to go out to the cloud SOAR environment and for these various signals, get them all cleaned up and provide some automation for this. Yeah. It's just not there in our training environment yet. We're barely stood up the cloud SOAR environment so far. In fact, I think if you go into the cloud SOAR environment, you're going to see nothing really there yet. We haven't built it out yet. Okay. Any other questions, folks? All right. So here's what I'd like to do. And just so you know, in case you're wondering, we're going to take a break in just a little bit. But what I'd like you to do is in your student guide, I would like you all to do Lab 2C, which is on page 10 of your PDF. So we're going to look at an insight. We're going to look at one called exfiltration with command and control. So if I go out here and if I go into my insights, and if I look for name contains, and I start typing in exfiltration, there, oops, hold on a second. Exfiltration with command and control. This is the one that you want. Now, this one appears to be in progress. This one appears to be in progress. This one happens to be new. Okay, they're all the same. I don't really care which one you grab, but I want you to go into one of them. And I want you to tell me the story of what's happening here, right? I want you to tell me what's happening. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 signals. And just give me a sense. Let's take 5 minutes or so and figure out what's going on. And then we'll debrief that, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. Okay? So let me set up a quick little 5-minute timer here. And if you guys would, like I said, I want you to investigate that insight. Excuse me. Hang on a second. Why don't you investigate this insight? Let me open up a new tab for the timer here. Okay. We pin this. We grab a new tab. Like I said, I'm going to give you 5 minutes here to investigate this and see what you think, and we'll talk about it. Any questions? Sure, I'll upload the lab guide. Yep. Lab guide's uploaded. Okay. Preet asked, is there a difference between the raw log and record? There is, there's not much of a difference. But the record is basically after we've compared it against a rule. So let me go, I'll talk about that after the 5 minutes is up. Okay, so hopefully I've given you about 5 minutes there to look this insight over. And what do you conclude from this insight? Tell me what's going on here. Tell me what's happening. Anybody? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Type in the chat box, or you can unmute your mic and
It seems that there's a deactivated Active Directory account, but there's still an active AWS account that was making API calls
good.
and something else, right?
Yep. So somebody's using the AMI user, the AWS account user from this device. They're logging in with an account that doesn't exist anymore, and they're making some API calls through that. So from AWS, from a terminated Active Directory account. So what would you do to fix it?
Terminate that Active Directory or the AWS account.
There you go. Terminate that and also see what they've been doing as far as the AWS stuff. See if they've been spawning up some AWS accounts and see if they've been, creating images and something's going to incur you cost. So, yep. So hopefully my hope is that you guys are seeing firsthand kind of the value here of what's going on, and again, you can see basically what's happening here and see, troubleshooting and that sort of thing. So good. All right. So what do you say? Thank you all, by the way, very much for participation here. What do you say we take a 10-minute break? And then after that, we're going to do lab 3. I'm going to kind of walk you through that myself. And then we'll finish up and do some other labs and wrap this thing up. But let's take a 10-minute break. You guys certainly deserve it. And so I'll see you back here when this counter gets down to 0. So go out and grab yourself some coffee, tea, juice, water, or whatever. I'll see you back in about 9 minutes and 52 seconds. Thanks. And we're back. Hopefully you all had a nice break. By the way, I'll turn my camera back on for a second. This is my executive producer here, Max. So Max sits there and keeps an eye on me while I'm teaching my class to make sure I don't mess up. So just wanted you guys to see another member of the team. So let's talk and continue on. Again, hopefully here you talked about what you guys discovered on lab 2C. But now what we want to do is we want to talk about lab 3. So, and this is going to go back to the question that was asked earlier. So somebody asked the question, what's the difference between logs and records? So let me go back to this slide here real quick. So records, like I said, are after we parse, map, and enrich, we generate records. However, these records ultimately come from our logs, from our messages. So our messages and logs are basically the same thing. And I think the reason the question is being asked, and it's a really good question, is that, gee, we see that we're pulling out the records, we're pulling out the content, but I want to go back and actually look at the raw logs to see what the raw logs are kind of telling me. The good news is most of that we extract out, so you don't necessarily need to look at the raw logs. However, that brings us to lab number 3. So here in lab number 3, I'm going to take lab 3A. And again, we're talking about our persistence with initial access. So if I go back in here to my Sumo Logic environment, if I stop the slides for just a second, and if I, like I said, go back in here, go to my insights, find my one with persistence. Again, I'm looking for name, contains, and I'll start typing in persistence, assuming I can start typing in correctly, assuming I can type in correctly here. Persistence with initial access. Now, again, some of these are in progress, some of these are new. They're all the same insight. Just every day, like I said, it gets regenerated. One of the things we want you to be aware of here, as I'm looking at this persistence with initial access, and I'm looking at, in this case, who the entity is, I can use the power of Sumo Logic. So somebody asked the question, I want to go back and see the raw logs. Well, I can using this context action button, and this context action button can also be customized. But I can do a search records for, this IP address. I can do a who is, lookup, all that fun stuff. I can also go back to Sumo Logic, and I can look at all of the logs, not just the logs that are coming into the CSE program, but all of the logs, and see where this IP address has been. So I can see, like I said, it was in this Linux environment. If I click on my sources, I can see it's been in about 12 different sources. And if I want to, I can click on these and I can filter them. So the point is, what lab 3 is trying to do for us, it's showing us how we can also take and find out more information. For example, here in lab 3A, I can take this lovely code that's right here, and I can copy it. And I can go back in here to Sumo and create a new log search. Paste this code in. Whoops, excuse me. I don't think it grabbed it all. Paste it all in. There we go. And actually, there's a little bit of spillover here on page 14, which I always find really helpful. And as you know from yesterday, if you want to add a new line, it's either a shift enter or an alt enter, depending on what keyboard you're on, whether you're on a Windows machine or a Mac machine. And so here, what I'm doing is I'm looking at my security records. I'm breaking things up by 1 hour time slices, and then I want to look for a specific IP address. What IP address do I want? Well, I want this IP address. 192.168.38. .192.168. Got 32, I think. 38, sorry. 38.102. 102, Jen. And again, the only thing you have to be careful of is that we, by default, our queries are good for 15 minutes. We want to go back to something a lot longer. Let's go back 7 days. And it doesn't like the double quotes. It's not a big deal. When you copy out quotes sometimes in the text editor, it puts smart quotes. So let's take care of that little problem. There we go. And so now my query is running. It's going back 7 days with my logs, and I can see where this IP address is in my CrowdStrike Falcon logs, my Proofpoint logs. And if I want to, of course, I can go to my raw messages and see where this information is. But again, you can write queries like this, just like we talked about yesterday. You can write queries to see where, what's been going on with this IP address, where they've been going to, what they've been doing, that sort of thing. And that's the point of Lab 3. We want to, not only show you the Cloud SIEM Enterprise, but also how we can tie it back into the other Sumo log searches and security searches and the security analytics stuff that you learned yesterday. So that's the purpose of Lab 3. Okay. And again, if you wanted to, in Lab 3C on your own time, you could take and go through this exercise if you want to. Again, continuing your exploration of that exfiltration with command and control that you saw yesterday. You want to see what they've been up to and things along those lines. Okay. Now, that pretty much takes care of using an insight and exploring an insight and all that good stuff. What I want to do next is I want to talk about how you can customize the Sumo Logic environment here. So let me scroll down to pick up my slides here. And here we go. So we want to talk about customizing and tuning your Cloud SIEM environment. So there's 3 things that we can do to customize things. Again, by default, we create rules for you. We update your system with those rules at least every 2 weeks, if not sooner. So a Sumo Logic or a Cloud SIEM rule is logical code that deploys based on the information of your record. It compares the record against the rule. If there's a match, the rule fires, it generates a signal, and it also extracts out that entity. So reminder that that's how that process happens. Okay. Now, the question is, can you create rules? Yes, you can. There are 4 custom rule types that you can create. Again, a great test question. So there's a match rule, and you'll need to know the different types and their, what they do. So a record matches on a simple Boolean condition. This statement is true or false. If it's true, it matches, we're good to go. So for example, a single successful login from an IP on a specifically banned list. That condition happens, we can fire off a match rule. Besides a match rule, we also have a threshold rule. So certain count of records that match a given condition. So for example, I want to see at least 5 failed login attempts within a specific time frame, within under an hour. That's a threshold rule. So there you've got condition and you've got a specific time frame. Then you've also got a chain rule, which is like 2 threshold rules combined. So 2 or more different events within a specific time window. So maybe I've got my failed 5 login attempts followed by at least 1 successful within a specific period of time. So the match rule, the threshold rule, the chain rule, and finally, the 4th one is the aggregation rule. I want to aggregate records that match on a condition. So I want to see all the different connection attempts from a specific IP address within a specific time frame, within an hour. So these are your 4 types of rules that you and I can create. In this class today, we will create a match rule. In tomorrow's admin class, we'll create a threshold and a chain rule. So we're going to walk you through these rules here over the course of today and tomorrow, for the most part. Okay. And when I ask you, when we start doing the labs for this, I want you to be very specific on how you name your rules. The reason being is I have to go back in and clean out your rules, and I don't want to delete any of the permanent rules that we've created. So if you follow our naming convention, we'll be fine. This is the interface for a rule. And on the left, basically, here's your logic. This is what's going to trigger it. And if it triggers it, this is what we're going to see as far as our signal. The name of the entity, using a specific name, summary messages, whatever we want to type in here. So I'm going to walk through that in just a few minutes. Just bear with me. So over here on the left, like I said, this is my if statement that's going to cause my signal to get generated. It says absolutely I can add rule tuning expressions. So there's 3 ways that you can customize. You can create your own rules. Absolutely. You can apply those to those rules a rule tuning expression. Now, what a rule tuning expression is, it's designed to generate an exception to the rules. For example, we have a rule that says, thou shalt not mess with the firewall settings. Okay. So the point is that thou shalt not mess with the firewall settings. Well, that's great, except if you're the firewall administrator. If you're the firewall administrator, they're in there maybe once a week, once a month, whatever, changing firewall settings. And it's going to generate a signal on that unless we create a rule tuning expression for that. So rule tuning expressions allow us to create exceptions to rules. And so we'll see that. So that's the second thing that you can customize. You can customize rules. You can also create rule tuning expressions. The third thing that we're going to talk about customization here is how you and I can also create a custom insight. Remember that normally for an insight to be generated, it's got to be a score of 12 or greater within a 2-week period of time. Well, I don't want to wait for that 2-week period of time and that score to be 12. I want it to go now. I've wrote a new rule. I want to test it. I want to create a custom insight for that rule. So we'll talk about how that you can do that. So the 3 things that you can do, like I said, are rule tuning, rules, and custom insight. And you'll see that in just a slide coming up. Again, when you fill out this information, you can specify your MITRE ATT&CK framework and all that good stuff. You'll see that here in just a little bit. Best practices for custom rules. I believe there might be a test question in here as well off this slide. Check and see if the rule already exists. Save yourself time. Work smart, not hard. If we created the rule, we'll update the rule. We'll maintain the rule. You don't have to worry about it. You create the rule. You got to maintain the rule. So know your system well, right? What kind of system, what kind of things happen? You know, if you're a Microsoft shop, then you're probably prone to specific Microsoft things. Maybe we want to be, take our rules and you want to buff them up a little bit more for the Microsoft side. So know your environment, know your systems and stuff well. Know your risk appetite and priorities. We're going to generate a bunch of rules that are based for a company. Well, if you're a bank company or a financial company, your risk appetite is probably minimal, and you want to key on anything. We'd rather key on it than not. So you may want to tweak and adjust things accordingly. So again, fix that. Understand the 4 rule types well. Again, they are match, aggregate, chain, threshold. Not necessarily in that order. Okay. Make small changes and test. One of the things that you're going to do when you create a rule is you're going to give it a score. Okay. You're going to give it a score, 0 to 10. Test question, 0 to 10. And on this 0 to 10, when you make a score, maybe you make it 5, or you make it 4, or whatever. When you go in to test it, and you decide you want to make it higher or lower, increment or decrement by 1. Don't increment or decrement by more than 1, because those small changes will allow you to control it a lot better. If you increment it by, say, 2 or 3, it may totally change things. And the big thing we want to do is make sure you don't generate false insights, which this last rule is probably one of my favorites. Every time you create a new rule, you want to mark it as a prototype. What is a prototype? What does it mean to be a prototype? It means that it will not fire off an insight. When you mark something as a prototype, it will not generate an insight on its own. So it will not affect your current SOC team. It won't get false things to troubleshoot. It's a way for you to test things. And then once you're happy with it, then you can release the prototype check mark on there. So I've obviously talked about this. Let's kind of play around here. So again, rule tuning, you can, with rule tunings are exceptions to rules you can use, and that way you can modify existing rules without having to rewrite them from scratch. So again, this is another technique, rule tuning. You can apply multiple rule tunings to multiple rules. Obviously, you can apply a rule tuning to multiple rules. You can apply a multiple rule tunings to rules if you want to. And that way, as we update the rules and stuff like that, it doesn't affect anything. You're just writing exceptions to those rules. Remember that rule tuning is an exception. And then last but not least, you can create custom insights, okay? Remember that an insight normally within a 14-day period of time looks at the score of the signals and adds them up. So if I were to look at my green boxes here, I've got 4 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2. Let's see, that's 7, 8, 12. That would generate an insight. If I look at my red triangles here, 6 plus 5 is 11, plus 7 is 18. That would generate an insight. But if I look at my blue circles, 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 2 is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 3 is 9. That would not generate an insight. So based on the scores is how this stuff happens, whether it generates an insight or not. So here I get an insight, here I get an insight, here I don't get an insight. So that's how this process works. And as I said, you can create custom insights. You can base it on one rule or a chain of rules if you want to. That chain of rules can be exactly in the same order or any order. So you can control that. Again, it's going to create faster alerting for specific known threats. Again, knowing your risk appetite, knowing your behaviors of your network, things like that. Okay. And this way you don't have to change any existing rules or insights. So we've talked about 3 things: rule tuning, expressions where you have exceptions to rules. That's what you use rule tuning for. You'll see that in the form of a test question. Custom rules where you have a specific threat or data source unique to your system that you want to generate a signal for. And then custom insights when you want to generate an insight, be alerted based on a rule or a chain of rules. Now, let's see this in action. So if you and I go to our lab guide here, in lab 4, the first thing they want us to do is to create a rule tuning expression. Okay. So if we go into our Cloud SIEM environment here, and if we click on this content icon right here, again, I see a lot more options than you do, okay, because I have more rights to this than you do, and we'll talk about rights tomorrow and how that gets set. But if I click on rule tuning, and that's what I want you to do, is I want you to click on rule tuning, and you'll notice that by default, we don't provide any rule tunings. So when we want to create one over here in the upper right-hand corner, we're going to go ahead and click create. And the first thing we're going to do is give it a name. And for this, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to type in your initials, and I'd like you to call this rule tuning. Why? Because later on after class, I've got to go find everybody's rule tuning and I've got to delete them. Okay. So give it your initials, rule tuning. Again, you can see this rule tuning is going to be enabled. Turn it off if I want to. Now, do I want to tune selected rules or all rules? Well, only selected rules. What selected rules do I want? So I can go down here and I can start typing in. I'm going to start looking for the word firewall. So I want to find firewall here. And so I'm going to use this AWS firewall training alert. Okay. And here's the premise behind this. I want to make sure it doesn't fire if I'm modifying the AWS firewall settings. Normally it would if somebody goes in there and changes it, but I'm the administrator. I don't want it to fire when I, John Meredith, am doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a rule. Here's the rule that I want to apply to. And then I'm going to sit there and provide some logic to this. So you'll notice I either have the include or exclude, and I'll come back to that in just a minute, but I want to write a rule. So here we go. I'm going to type in email, and you'll notice that it sits there and says, as I start typing the email, it's got message ID, sender, subject, user email, whatever. I'm going to use user email. And I'm going to say not exclamation mark equals. That's what we do a not equals. And so I'm going to sit there and type in. Now, when we type in a string, we type it in single quotes. So if I type in a single quote string, you'll notice it automatically adds the end quote. And so I'm going to type in here my Sumo Logic email. Okay. Now, the way this works is if any user is accessing this environment, this alert's going to fire, except if this user is John Meredith. If it's John Meredith, it says user email not equal to John Meredith, this will not fire. Now, this is including my records. If I want to write it another way, and again, this is all about Boolean logic and all that stuff, I can say I want to exclude this rule from being fired if, and then I would get rid of the exclamation mark and say user email equals J Meredith. So I can say I want to include or exclude records that match the expression. So however logically you want to figure it out. And so now I have written this rule tuning, and I can click submit. And now, again, it applied, not only did it write this, but it also applied it to this particular rule. And if I want to, in the upper left-hand corner, I can click on rule tuning. And here in a minute, it might take a minute for it to update. I will see all of the various rule tunings that you and I have created. There we go. So there's the rule tunings that we've created. And then again, I can refresh it to see them. I can enable them. I can delete them. I can do whatever I need to do. But basically, that was lab number 4, where we created this. Okay. Now in lab number 5, we're going to create a match rule. A match rule. We're going to create a rule is what we're going to create. So let's go back in here. This time, let's go into our context window. This time, we want to go into rules. And here's where we want to be very careful. Because out of the box, we've got something like 769 rules right now. We'll probably have more in the weeks ahead. Just the nature of the beast. But you and I are going to create a rule. And again, I need to go in here and clean out the rules that you and I create after this. So let's go ahead and click the create button here in the upper right-hand corner. And you notice when we click create, we have a choice between creating a match rule, a threshold rule, a chain rule, or an aggregation rule. We want to go ahead and create a match rule. So let's go ahead and click on create match. And then the first thing we're going to do is name this. Again, I would like you to type in your initials, and I would like you to call this match rule, because that's what I'm going to be looking for to clean these out when we're done with class. Now, regarding this match rule, if you look down here at the bottom, I've got a reset conditions, a submit button, and I now have this golden triangle. And if I put my cursor on this golden triangle, it's telling me that I'm missing some things. I need an entity field. I need a signal name. So this is going to keep track of whether or not I can submit this or not, or if there are errors in this. So as I mentioned to you before, over here is the logic that fires off based on this rule. And if I go into our lab guide here and I look at lab 5, custom match rule, they want me to use this device IP equals 127.0.0.1. And most of us know that as the loopback IP. But I'm going to go ahead and take that expression. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it. And I want you to be aware of something. Whenever you copy and paste something that has quotes in it, you're going to probably want to redo the quotes, because this text editor will add smart quotes. If I look at this, whatever my string is should be in red. If it's not in red, check your quotes. So delete the quote, re-add the quote, boom, we're in good shape. So be advised that most, when we generate PDFs or documents or whatever, it turns the quotes into smart quotes, and we don't want to do that. So basically what I'm creating is a rule that says, hey, if the device IP is a local host IP, then I want something to happen. By the way, I could, if I want to, add a rule tuning expression here. Remember that rule tuning expression I added earlier? I could add it here if I want to. The book has us do that. I'm not going to worry about doing it, but you can or can't. It's up to you. I don't really care. And then over here on entity, what do I want to focus on. Well, we're talking about device IP here, so it makes sense for us to select the entity that we want is device IP. So in this rule, we're defining what the entity is. And then here in my name, using a name, I can put in something like suspicious IP address found, whatever. Because this is going to show up in my signal. And then in my summary, I can type something else in here, Houston, we have a problem. Okay. Only it helps if I spell Houston correctly. And then I can also put in here a description. In fact, I'm just going to do this. Okay. And then as far as my severity score, I can go from 0 to 10. And that's a test question, 0 to 10. So you decide what you initially want to give this a score of. I'm going to make it a low score. Okay. Because everything shows up as a loopback ID. I don't want to cause a lot of alerts here. Then here where it says with tags, here's where I add my technique and my MITRE ATT&CK technique and stuff tags. So here, this is about probably discovery as far as a tactic. And then as far as my technique, this is about, I could pick whatever the heck I want to here. Local system, data from local system. So you can add your MITRE ATT&CK techniques and things there. Now, down here at the bottom is where you can save this rule as a prototype. What does this checking this checkbox do? It means it will not fire off an insight. So as you're testing this, as you're developing this, as you're playing with this, check this. Now, I'm going to give you the same advice that we've been given internally by the people who originally created this product. I don't care how many years you've been doing this, how expert you are, that sort of thing. Always, always, always check the checkbox. Mark it as a prototype. I don't care how confident you are in your findings, that this really doesn't need to be tested. That's what test it. Okay. So do yourself a favor and test it. Mark it, check it as a prototype. And then once you're happy with it, after you've run through it a couple of times and stuff like that, then you can clear the checkbox. Now, in my case, when I clicked submit, it's now showing me here is my new rule. And right now it hasn't been activated. Okay. But if I go back to my rules and I pick a rule, for example, here, this threat intel match IP, if I click on that, I can see when it's been activated by the dark signals, 280 screens, 280 signals there. Okay. So I can see when a rule, when I click on that rule, has been activated. You see it all in here. This is all where it's been fired off. And if I put cursor in here, I can see how many signals it generated within that 1 hour of time frame, or that 1 day of time, 1 day of time frame. Okay. As I mentioned to you, if I go back in here and I say created, and I click on it again to sort it in descending order, here's all of our match rules that you and I are creating. And these are what I'm going to clean out when we finish up class. Okay. All right. That's match rules. Any questions on match rules? The last thing that you and I get to create here in lab number 6, I believe, is we get to create a custom insight. So in the case of our custom insight, again, we go up here to our content icon. This time we grab custom insight. Now remember, an insight normally gets generated over a 2-week period of time when the score is a certain value. I don't want to wait. I want to create a custom insight here. So I can click the create button. I can give this thing a name. And again, we're going to put our initials in there. I'm going to call it custom insight. And then what signals, I can either do this based on signals or I can do this based on rules. So for example, here, I can sit there and select some specific rules. Maybe I want to find my rule that I just created. So I can define the rule or rules if I want other rules in here. And I can say that if I got more than one rule, do I want to be in any order or exact order? So you can add the rules that you want to. So this is what's going to cause the insight to be triggered. And then if it's triggered, what do I want to call it? By default, whatever name I chose is what it's going to call it. And then here in my description, I can add a description. Whatever. Now with insights, they go either low, medium, high, or critical. So they have a score themselves, low, medium, high, or critical. And so you can specify that if you want to, and you can also specify, again, your MITRE attack framework. So again, I'll use discovery here. And again, in my tactics or technique, I will use data from local file system again. So this is how you and I create a custom insight. And then I can click submit. And off to the races. There it is. There's my custom insight. I can see all of my custom insights that are here. I can disable them. I can delete them, so forth and so on. If you want to edit any of these, you can click on the link. If you want to go back and edit any of your rules, you go into the rules, find your rule, click on it. For rule tuning, you can go in and click on it, and you can edit it yourself. Okay. Any questions about those? All right, let's wrap it up. So as I said, in lab 4, we created a custom rule tuning expression. Again, that's going to create an exception to a rule. There we go. So we can create an exception to a rule. Lab 5, we did a custom match rule. And in lab 6, we created a custom insight. All right. So what we're going to do next is we're going to prepare you for the exam, get you ready to take your certification exam. But are there any questions about the course or any questions about the content that you want to talk about? All right, then let's get to the exam. To get to the exam, what I need you to do, what I want you to do, is I need you to get back to the Sumo Logic cloud CIP system. So again, if you go up here, if you're in the, the heads up display, if you go in here and you go back to continuous intelligence platform, one thing you'll notice is it automatically opens it up in a new tab, which I find a little annoying. I think that's a bug. It should open up in the same tab. Okay. But the point is, I need you to log out of the Sumo Logic environment. So let me make sure I only got one tab open. And then, like I said, you're logged in as training analyst, whatever. And I want you to log out. So again, you click on you click on the navigation panel if it's not open. Down here where your name is, you click on it. And then the last option is to sign out. This is going to sign you out. Now, from here, what I want you to do is I want you to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment. Okay, so that you're logged in with your name, your credentials, that sort of thing. And Steve, since I know you're a Sumo Logic employee, you would log in to say customer usage or one of those. So you're logged in with your name and your proper credentials, the Sumo demo environment, whatever. So I want you to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment. So you're going to go to your company's URL, type in your credentials, log in. When you log in to get to our certification area, for those of you who weren't with us yesterday, again, you click on the House tab here, click on the Certification tab underneath that, click on the Get Certified tab. And now, because you're logged in as you can take our self-paced training. This is all of our self-paced courses. And here's where we keep the passwords and stuff like that. So you can go in here and you can take all of these lovely self-paced training classes if you want to. Some of them have certifications, but not all of them. Okay. So you can take self-paced training. You can also, if you want to, look at a hold of our slides and stuff. By the way, this learn a new skill is a bunch of our micro lessons. So we've got quick 5 to 10 minute short videos on how to create a collector, how to do observability, how to, all kinds of different little micro lessons in here that you can go check out. But what we want to do is we want to click on the Get Certified field. So I want you in this portal here to click Get Certified. And then here, I want us to find the Cloud SIEM Fundamentals exam, not the administration exam, not the Cloud SOAR Level 1 exam, but the Cloud SIEM Fundamentals exam. Okay. And on that Cloud SIEM Fundamentals exam, if I click on it, and I want you to click on it, you'll see that you have an option to register. It's absolutely free. Free is my favorite price. And I want to point out some things here. So if you'll bear with me just a second, I'm going to kind of digress. Up here in the upper right-hand corner is your profile. And if you click on that profile, if you want to, you can add a picture. I did, just because I'm a trainer here. I thought it might be a good idea to show you that you can add a picture. Here's all of your information. First name, your last name, all that fun stuff. And then here you can see all the exams that you've passed. You can see their certificates, view their certificates. You can add that certification to your LinkedIn profile. So in your certifications area of LinkedIn, it will add it for you. Okay, that's what it does. If I scroll all the way down to the bottom and I click done, it takes me out of there. Now, there's a reason why I mentioned that, and I'm going to get to that here real quick. So here I am, I'm ready to take the exam. Of course, I click on before you start. It tells me that this exam, because it's fairly new, only has 20 questions, not 30, but 20. And you got 60 minutes to complete it. We even made the passing score 70, not 75. So we're really trying to help you here. It's a new exam. We're still checking things out. And the questions are going to be fill in the blank, matching text, drag and drop, all that good stuff. It says the exam is open note, open book. You can even ask the instructors. Myself or Adele are standing by for your questions. Okay. So you get stuck on something, ask us. Now, when I click next, it's going to take me, it's going to take me to my terms of use. Again, this is copyrighted by Sumo and all that fun stuff, something new that you may not have seen before. We added it to this exam. Then I click next. And that takes me to my exam. So here's my 60-minute timer up here. It says here I got 20 questions, 60 minutes. Here's my first attempt. And if I scroll down, I'm ready to start. Now I'm going to click ready to start. I don't want you to start just yet. Humor me. So I'm going to go in here and it says mouse click on the menu that gives you the access to the rule tuning expression. You may recall that was the content. So I'm going to go over here and mouse over and click, mark it. And then I'm going to scroll down here and hit next. So that question answered. How many signals does an insight contain? Okay. So let's select 2 choices here. Okay. Well, one is as many signals as it takes to hit the activity score threshold. That's true. Okay. And then there's no limit if it occurs within a 14-day window. Those, I think, are the best 2 answers. So I'm going to click next. I'm not going to go through the entire exam. I want to show you that I'm going through here. And then I'm going to end out of here. So I'm going to submit my answers. And I know I didn't pass. I only answered 2 questions, right? But it says, you didn't answer all questions. It's trying to keep me in there. That's fine. Very noble. But I'm going to tell it submit all answers. And there's a reason why I did this. Because when I'm done here, I can see what questions I got right. I can see what questions I got wrong. Don't know why I got them wrong, but I can see which ones I got wrong. And most importantly, if you want to add this exam to your profile up here, make sure you click the submit results. That will then add this to your profile. Now, if you fail the exam, you can take it again immediately, whatever. I don't care if you click submit results. But once you pass it, I want to make sure you click submit results and get credit for taking it and get credit for passing it. And as I am prone to do here, I also want to remind you that you can get a nice little Uber Eats voucher that I am going to put in the chat box. So here is the form for once you pass your certification exams to get your $15 Uber Eats voucher. So what questions have you before I stop talking and let you guys do your thing? Any questions?
Is there a preferred order of the exams that we take them in? Obviously, we take the fundamentals one first.
I mean, you're going to take this course was the Cloud SIEM Fundamentals class exam. That's the exam we want you to take. If you previously had the fundamentals class, or if you're worried about what order to take the certification exams in, I would take them after I've taken the class. If you want to go back and take the fundamentals class exam, the straight fundamentals, you could, or if you want to take Search Mastery or any of them, it's entirely up to you. Am I answering your question?
Sure, yeah, thanks. So I'll pick the other ones in any order as they come up. Thanks.
Yeah, feel free. Yeah, whatever works best for you. But I would certainly take this one now while the information is still fresh in your mind. Which, by the way, if you're busy and you don't have time to take it, that's understandable. Come back and take it tomorrow or whenever you want. But I would encourage you to take it while the information is fresh in your mind. So, any other questions? All right. Let me stop actually, before I stop the recording, let me do this. Again, on behalf of myself and Odell and everybody at Sumo Logic, want to thank you for attending. We hope to see you in the class again real soon. Please be safe. Again, tomorrow is the Cloud SIEM admin class, so you may want to come back and join us for that. Otherwise, thanks a lot for attending, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Please be safe, and I'll stop talking, and I'll stop my video, and we'll stop the recording.